distinguished representatives from the government, university faculty, and all of you here who have so graciously welcomed the Ecological Restoration Alliance to Jordan. It's really been a fantastic visit. It's been wonderful to be able to have this event here, and some of us have been here for the better part of a week now. I'm Jim Miller, and I'm here this afternoon to tell you about the Missouri Botanical Gardens ecological restoration projects. But I want to do so in a broader context of the overall importance and critical need for ecological restoration, and also with some comment on the specific role of botanical gardens in the process. We live on a miraculous planet, home to so many different species of plants and animals. We don't really even have a satisfactory answer to how many different kinds there are. Yet we all exist in a very, very thin envelope, the atmosphere, which if we were able to drive our cars vertically at typical highway speed, we would leave in just about 5 minutes. So it's a very thin skin in which all of this exists. And when we look closer, all is not well. Humankind we've increased our population 7-fold in the last 200 years. And as a consequence of that, we're having unprecedented impact on the planet. We're causing extinction, the likes of which the Earth has never seen throughout its entire history. And now we're changing the climate in ways that will only hasten environmental problems. We obviously need to do everything we can to save whatever we can that still exists. Much of it is already destroyed and degraded. But we're past a tipping point. We're past a point where there is adequate habitat for all of the world's plants and animals to exist, and past a point where the natural areas can make the Earth the kind of habitable, comfortable place that we want it to be. There's a dire need for ecological restoration, and botanical gardens can play a critical role. I think in particular, gardens are well suited to assist with what we consider to be holistic restoration, which is an ongoing process to restore natural ecosystems that were what might have once been in a place, or what might be a logical composition of species given the climate and soils and other parameters at an individual location. It's a process of restoring natural processes and restoring ecosystems that are self-maintaining. It doesn't mean that they become static and never change, but it means that they manage their own trajectory, probably with a good deal of our help. And importantly, that they conserve biodiversity. So that's not the right thing. And gardens are uniquely positioned to help with this effort. Research gardens, arboretum, and similar institutions often are home to expertise in taxonomy that's necessary to understand the species composition that might exist or might be a goal at a given location. There's centers for excellence in horticulture that's needed to raise and maintain and plant and establish all of the things that are necessary to grow ecosystems in restoration. They're home for expertise in ecology needed to design plant succession. And they're often have strong capabilities in monitoring and can evaluate the success and adjust future efforts to improve the success of restoration. This is a limited set of skills. There are lots more, and I'll talk about communications and some other things a little later. The Missouri Botanical Garden has been involved in restoration for a long time, and the earliest efforts were restoring prairies at a piece of property we own. It's about a half an hour west of the main garden. We began restoring natural prairies, the natural Midwestern grasslands, more than 30 years ago. And Holistic restoration in this ecosystem is a little bit difficult because there aren't really precise records of what the species composition was in any individual prairie at any individual site. So this has been an example to some extent of what James Aronson would call intelligent tinkering and trying different species that were known to exist in prairies of central North America. And some of them worked and became self-persisting, and others didn't. And over time, a species balance was achieved. It may not be what was originally envisioned, but these do look like very much natural, self-maintaining ecosystems. Today, they're diverse, a mixture of grasses and other flowering plants, and they're pretty much self-maintaining. The initial planning to establish these, at least at the oldest sites, is no longer being added to. The only real maintenance that they require is they need some degree of regular burning to prevent woody trees and shrubs from taking them over. From this initial start, restoring prairies, we've used this because botanical gardens also play an important role in communicating about restoration. So we've taken the prairie plants that we've been restoring, and we've taken them out into the community. This is the main headquarters for Alberici, which is an architectural building firm that promotes sustainable architecture and sustainable building practices. And they've done away with their typical corporate landscape, and they've established a prairie all around their property, and we help them do that. Likewise, the Donald Danforth Center, one of our research partner institutions in St. Louis, is in the process of expanding its campus, and in the new design, they're replacing miles and miles of high-maintenance, high-input turfgrass with native prairie plants. These aren't big, self-sustaining prairies that will provide habitats for prairie animals. They're very much embedded in an urban environment, but they do provide habitat for things like migrating monarch butterflies, and they do support native plants and provide a mosaic of native plants in an urban landscape. We've taken this further. This is an example from one of the golf courses in St. Louis, and not down the middle of the golf course individual holes, but around in the area in between the holes, they've established native prairie grasses in a restoration effort. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Madagascar and tropical forest restoration. The Missouri Botanical Garden has been active in Madagascar for more than 30 years, and among a large portfolio of things that we do, including basic floristic exploration, basic taxonomy, community-based conservation, and other things, we're very actively involved in restoration in Madagascar. In particularly, following the expansion of Madagascar's protected area system, which was in a process that was called Vision Durban, following the Durban World Parks Congress. The Missouri Botanical Garden has assumed management authority for 13 protected areas. And at many of those, we have active restoration underway. In all cases, it's a conservation approach that is participatory, with all of the stakeholders having a shared vision of what will happen, why it needs to happen, and how it will happen. And so we work in and with communities and engage them and provide them an opportunity to not only be part of the process, but to benefit economically from the process. So the role of the programs includes restoring degraded sites and, in a few places, attempting to restore forests from sites that have been completely destroyed. And I'll show you one in a moment that's particularly an uphill battle. So this is Ankafo Bay. This is one of the 13 sites that we manage. It's a very small remaining fragment about 2 hours north of the capital of Antananarivo. And it's one of the last remaining fragments of a type of forest that once probably covered much of the high central plateau of Madagascar for many thousands of square kilometers. And it's almost all gone and almost all replaced by entirely anthropogenic grasslands of introduced exotic grasses that are of low nutrient value, that are growing on red laterite soil that when exposed to the sun do exactly what red laterite soil does when you stick it in a kiln. It turns into something that's the consistency of a brick. So this is really a hard place to accomplish restoration. What remains at Uncatho Bay, is about 33 hectares. When I first went to Madagascar in the 1980s, this forest fragment was significantly larger, but as the grasslands burned every year, it burned the edge of the forest, and the remaining fragment has been ever shrinking. In recent years, we've established a fire break to prevent the threat of wildfires. Now, why do we care about this little tiny fragment? We care about it for a number of reasons. One, it's one of the last remaining fragments of a once diverse ecosystem, and we know what was there. There was forest there in not so distant times. The French collected extensively in the area in the 50s and 60s, and so we have herbarium specimens that record the species diversity that was once present there. We know what the forest would have looked like. It's also home to a wide variety of plants that themselves are highly endangered and threatened. The plant that you see in the lower right here, Schizolina templikatsana, the main population of the last few known populations of this is in this fragment. And this is a member of one of the families of plants that's endemic to Madagascar. It's not the only endangered plant there. There's another 5 or 6 that are known from either just this fragment or this fragment in a few scattered places not too far away. This fragment is also home to this little animal you can all know like neck and this animal is important for a variety of reasons. It's important because, first of all, as we all know, it's easier to rustle up conservation support for something that's cute like that than it is for a plant. It's also important because this is one of the mouse lemurs, and we're waiting on molecular data to confirm that this is in fact an undescribed species. It's hiding out in this little fragment of forest, and it's one of only 2 places that it's known from. If it in fact turns out to be a new species, and we'll know that in the next month or 2, and we think it is, it's going to be the smallest primate that's known, and it still doesn't have a name. And it's sitting there in a tiny fragment of forest that we're doing our most desperate effort to protect. So this is what Uncatho Bay looks like from a distance. There's forest. The last remaining forest that hasn't burned is in the wetter lower portion of the valley. We have now established fire breaks up on the hillside, and we are attempting to reforest all of the area inside of the fire break. We had a real setback in October that the fall wildfires were set, and they jumped over the fire break, and we lost almost a quarter of the forest. It burned. And so we have again redoubled our efforts and are widening the fire breaks and doing our best to plant trees and replace these highly flammable grasses with forest. So we have a team of local people from the local village that go out and gather seed. We use that seed to raise plants in nurseries. This is the site manager who's there, who manages 4 nurseries that are in proximity to this forest. And we've grown several thousand trees, some of which have been interplanted in and around the edge of the forest, and others have been planted out into that grassland to try to begin to extend the forest out to the existing fire breaks, which will then be moved out further. And hopefully we can continue until we have once again restored enough forest that we can maintain the full complement of plant species that were once there, as well as provide adequate habitat for the lemurs that are there. I showed you the little mouse lemur. There's another small lemur there that also might be a new species. And then there's a third lemur. The third lemur actually happens to be the most common species in Madagascar. Those little lemurs are all trapped in an area of forest that's pretty tiny, and there isn't anywhere for them to go. There's not another tree in sight. So we work with the local community to take the seedlings that we've raised and carefully go out and plant them. And it's a real uphill battle to get enough organic matter into the soil to protect them with a little bit of shade and get them to establish out in this highly exposed area. The wonderful thing is that following the forest burning, the community came out. They stayed out 24 hours a day for 3 consecutive days to fight the wildfire and get it under control. And they worked with a local filming company and made a wonderful film about Ancafo Bay and the importance. From their standpoint, it seems a little defensive. Sort of one of the main messages was that we didn't set the fire, but it really is a nice story about how the whole community has really bought into this effort. So because of that community buy-in, we've continued to keep this as one of our priority areas. So what are the prospects? We know that in the 50 years ago, Ancafo Bay was largely forested. The high plateau was mostly forested with probably just a few anthropogenic openings in it. Today, it's reduced down to a 33-hectare fragment in a few little patches of trees and shrubs. So the prospects for the future really depend upon how much we can put into this to restore the forest and have the community work with us to continue to maintain it. This is the most difficult of the forest sites we're working in Madagascar, and it will require constant input, at least for the near future, to change the trajectory of this forest. So I think botanical gardens, arboreta, and similar institutions are often home to unique skills and resources that allow all of the science that's necessary to understand floristic composition, ecological succession, horticultural skills, and all of the other things that are necessary for the biological understanding. And we have a long history of working with the people in Madagascar and strong relationships with the communities that are also essential. The combination of those two things, in addition to our ability to communicate and be advocates for this work, make botanical gardens uniquely suited to do this kind of work. Thanks.